Hi guys, welcome to this space. Tonight, we are beginning a new journey together, a long-form exploration of history designed to settle your mind and carry you into a deep, restful sleep. This series is titled Inside Nazi Germany, Ordinary Life Under the Regime. Over the course of these episodes, we aren't going to focus on the loud speeches, the maps of battlefields, or the dates of grand political maneuvers. Instead, we are going to look at the small things. We are going to step into the shoes of the shopkeeper, the mother, the office clerk, and the student. We are going to look at what it felt like to wake up in a world that was changing, one quiet morning at a time. As you listen, I want you to let the weight of your day fall away. My voice will stay low and steady, a constant companion as we walk through the streets of Berlin, Munich, and small rural villages in the 1930s. We are here to observe, to feel the texture of the past, and to understand how the extraordinary becomes ordinary when it happens slowly enough. There is no need to rush, no need to take notes. Just let the imagery wash over you like a gentle tide. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let your breathing find its own natural, slow rhythm. We are going back now, traveling through the decades until the air smells of coal smoke and fresh bread, and the sound of the world is the rhythmic clicking of bicycle tires on cobblestones. The year is 1933. Imagine a crisp morning in a residential neighborhood on the outskirts of a German city. The sun is just beginning to crest over the steeply pitched roofs, casting long, pale shadows across the pavement. It is quiet. In these early hours, the world feels much as it always has. You might hear the distant clink of glass bottles as the milkman makes his rounds, the heavy glass clinking softly in wooden crates. There is the scent of damp stone and the faint, sweet aroma of wood smoke drifting from chimneys. Inside the apartments, the ceramic stove stool, ornate structures of green or white tile being stoked for the day. For the average family, life is a collection of small, tactile rituals. You reach for your coffee often, a mix of real beans and chicory, and pour it into a heavy porcelain cup. You sit at a wooden table that has been in your family for 20 years. The newspaper, the Volkischer, Beobachter, or perhaps a local gazette, arrives with a soft thud against the door. In these early days, the change isn't a roar. It's a whisper. It's a new headline, a different tone in the editorials, a sense that the chaos and unemployment of the previous years are finally being tidied up. To the person sitting at that breakfast table, the primary feeling isn't one of terror. It is, for many, a strange, cautious sense of relief. The world felt broken for a long time, and now it feels as though someone is finally sweeping the floor. In the corner of the living room sits a new centerpiece of the German home, the radio, specifically the Volksempfänger, or the People's Receiver. It is a simple bakelite box with a glowing amber dial. It is designed to be affordable, a gift of technology to the common man. As you move about your morning, the radio is a constant, low hum in the background. It doesn't always play political rallies. More often, it plays light, orchestral music, folk songs, or weather reports. But every so often, the music fades, and a voice comes on. The voice is calm, authoritative, and speaks of national pride, of a new beginning, and of the German spirit. The genius of the time was how it integrated into the domestic sphere. You would be peeling potatoes or mending a sock, and the air around you would be filled with the idea that you were part of something much larger than your own small life. The propaganda wasn't always a shove. It was a warm bath, It made the listener feel seen, valued, and safe. Think about the texture of that bakelite. It's smooth, slightly warm to the touch from the vacuum tubes glowing inside. It becomes a member of the family. You stop questioning the voice coming out of it, because that voice has become the soundtrack to your most private moments. By 8 a.m., the streets begin to fill. You see men in wool coats and felt hats walking briskly toward the U-Bahn or the tram. There is a specific sound to a city in the 1930s, the metallic screech of the tram on its tracks. The ringing of a bell, the shuffle of leather-soled shoes. You notice small changes in the visual landscape. There are more flags now. They hang from balconies, long drapes of red, white, and black. At first, they might seem festive, like a parade that never ended. You pass a shop window where a sign has been posted. It's a small sign, perhaps just a few words about who is welcome here and who is not. You feel a slight prickle of unease, but you have a train to catch. You have a job to go to, and for the first time in years, that job feels secure. The fear of the breadline, which haunted the 1920s, is beginning to recede. This is the bargain of the era. A little bit of your soul for a little bit of stability. As you sit on the wooden bench of the train, you look at the people opposite you. Everyone is polite. They nod to one another. There is a sense of order. The graffiti is being cleaned off the walls. The parks are being swept. To the casual observer, Germany looks like a country that has finally found its footing. It looks peaceful. Let's move our focus to a schoolhouse in a small town. The air here smells of chalk, dust, old paper, and the floor wax used to keep the hallways shining. Children arrive in sturdy shoes, carrying leather satchels on their backs. For them, the regime is not a political choice. It is the only reality they truly know. The morning begins not with a prayer, but with a salute. It is a sharp movement, a reaching out of the arm, but to a 7-year-old, it is just a routine. Like brushing their teeth, the textbooks are different now. Biology lessons talk about the soil, the blood, and the inherited traits of the Volk. History is rewritten to emphasize a long line of heroes leading directly to the present moment. But if you were a child sitting in that wooden desk, you wouldn't feel indoctrinated. You would feel important. You would be told that the future of the nation rests on your shoulders. You spend your afternoons in the Hitler Youth or the League of German Girls. For many, this was the highlight of the week. It meant camping trips, singing songs around a fire, and escaping the watchful eyes of parents. It felt like a club. It felt like belonging. The regime understood that if you could capture the joy of a child's afternoon, you could own their loyalty forever. Imagine the sound of dozens of children marching down a dirt road, their voices raised in a folk song. The rhythm of their feet is hypnotic. Left, right, left, right, right. It creates a sense of unity that is hard to resist. You aren't an individual anymore. You are a cell in a larger body. As evening falls, the light turns a deep, bruised purple. Families return to their homes. The dinner table is a place of warmth, but also a place where a new kind of silence begins to grow. You sit down to a meal of rye bread, butter, and perhaps a stew of cabbage and pork. But you find yourself choosing your words carefully. You aren't sure if your neighbor, the one you've known for 10 years, has joined the party. You aren't sure if your own child might mention a joke you made at the dinner table during their school lesson the next day. This is the silent compliance. It isn't a loud, dramatic fear. It's a subtle tightening in the chest. It's the decision to talk about the weather, or the price of eggs, or the cousin's wedding, rather than the news. You look across the table at your spouse. You see the same fatigue, the same quiet resignation. You have your home. You have your food. You have your order. And if the price is a bit of silence, you pay it. You pay it every night. The shadows in the room grow longer as the lamp is turned down. The ceramic stove still radiates a dull, comforting heat. Outside, the heavy boots of a patrol might click-clack against the stones. But inside, you pull the heavy down quilt up to your chin. You tell yourself that things are better now. You tell yourself that as long as you mind your own business, you will be fine. What people felt most in those middle years of the 1930s was a strange duality. On one hand, there was the beauty of labor, clean factories, new motorways, the Autobahn, stretching across the countryside like ribbons of progress, and organized vacations through the strength, through joy. Programmed imagine being a factory worker who has never seen the ocean. Suddenly, you are offered a ticket on a cruise ship. You stand on the deck, feeling the salt spray on your face, looking at the horizon. You feel a profound sense of gratitude. They did this for me, you think. But on the other hand, there is the unseen. There is the shop that is suddenly boarded up. There is the professor who no longer comes to the cafe. There is the empty seat in the orchestra. People learned to look away. It is a human faculty, the ability to focus so intensely on your own small circle of light that the darkness surrounding it becomes invisible. They focused on the new car being promised to Volkswagen and the excitement of the upcoming Olympics. They focused on the flowers in their window boxes. The regime didn't just rule through fear. It ruled through the management of attention. It gave the people 1,000 small things to be proud of, to be busy with, and to talk about, so that they wouldn't have the energy to look at the things that were disappearing. We are moving back into the mid-1930s, a time when the new regime was no longer a novelty, but a permanent fixture of the landscape. It was a time when the new normal had set in, and the people of Germany were simply living their lives within the frame that had been built around them. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of your body against the mattress. Our journey tonight isn't about the grand events you find in history books. We are looking for the quiet moments, the sound of a broom on a porch, the smell of a Sunday roast, the specific way a person might lower their voice when a certain neighbor walks by. This is the history of the senses. A slow walk through a world that felt solid and permanent to those who walked its streets. Imagine a Sunday morning in a medium-sized town like Weimar or Freiburg. The church bells are ringing a sound that has defined the rhythm of German life for centuries. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the charcoal used for heating. On Sundays, the pace of life slows down. In an ordinary household, the morning begins with the ritual of dressing in Sunday best. For the father, this might be a stiff collared shirt and a wool waistcoat. For the children, it's clean stockings and polished shoes. There is a specific pride in neatness, a sense that being orderly is a civic duty. As the family walks to church, they pass the local administrative building. A massive swastika flag hangs from the second-story balcony. It is so large that the bottom of the red fabric brushes against the stone lintel when the wind blows. To us, looking back, that flag is a jarring symbol of tyranny. But to the family walking by in 1935, it has become as unremarkable as a mailbox or a street lamp. It is simply part of the scenery. It is the way things are. The service inside the church is familiar, yet there is a subtle shift. The pastor might mention the national community or the God-given leadership of the country. After the service, People gather in the square. They talk about the weather, the upcoming harvest, or the local football scores. But you might notice something. When the conversation turns even slightly toward the government, people don't necessarily stop talking, but their eyes wander. They check who is standing behind them. They lean in a little closer. This is the German glance, a quick, unconscious look over the shoulder that became a national habit. Let's move inside a typical kitchen in a Berlin tenement. The walls are painted a pale, utilitarian green. On the wall, next to a traditional wooden crucifix or a framed landscape, there is a new addition, a portrait of the Führer. It isn't a large portrait, and it isn't decorated with gold. It's just there. It watches the mother as she prepares the midday meal. The smell of the kitchen is dominated by Intifada one-pot meal. The government has designated one Sunday a month as one-pot Sunday. The idea is simple. You eat a cheap, humble stew of lentils or potatoes and meat scraps, and you donate the money you saved to the winter relief charity. Listen to the sound of the knife hitting the wooden cutting board. Thump, thump, thump. The mother is chopping carrots. On the radio, in the corner, a military band is playing a march. The music is jaunty and bright. Between the songs, an announcer talks about the victory of the will and the purity of the German home. The mother doesn't always listen to the words. The radio is just a background hum, like the sound of a nearby brook. She is thinking about her son's shoes, which are getting too small, and whether she can afford a piece of beef for next Sunday. She isn't a fanatic. She doesn't attend every rally, but she appreciates the order. She remembers the 1920s, when money lost its value so fast that she had to carry a basket of bills just to buy a loaf of bread. Now, the prices are stable. Her husband has a job. The streets are clean to her. The regime isn't an ideology. It's a guarantor of her kitchen's peace. This is the quietest form of support of a person who is simply grateful that things aren't worse. Now, imagine the father's world. He works in an office or a small factory. The workspace is filled with the rhythmic clatter of typewriters and the smell of machine oil and cigarette smoke. Every morning starts with the German greeting. You walk into the office, you raise your arm, and you say the words. In the beginning, it felt awkward, like wearing a suit that was a size too small. But by 1936, it's muscle memory. You do it without thinking, the way you might say good morning or hello. In the father's desk drawer, there is a small book, the Anempus, or ancestor passport. It is a document that proves his Aryan lineage back several generations. To get it, he had to write letters to rural parishes, asking for his grandparents' baptismal records. It was a tedious, bureaucratic task. Does he believe in the pseudoscience behind it? Perhaps not entirely, but he likes the feeling of belonging. He likes the stamp on the paper. It gives him a sense of security. It tells him that he is in, while others, the ones he sees less and less of, are out. In the break room, the conversations are careful. There is always one man, perhaps, a younger clerk with a sharp haircut, who is a true believer. He wears the party badge on his lapel. When he enters the room, the tone of the conversation changes. The jokes about the local go-lighter stop. The talk turns to the new Autobahn projects. The father goes back to his desk. He focuses on his ledgers. He tells himself that he is just an accountant, just a cog in a machine. He doesn't make the laws. He just follows the procedures. This is how the regime functioned, not through a nation of monsters, but through a nation of people who were very good at focusing on their own desks. As the afternoon sun begins to dip, we walk through the city streets. The visual environment is saturated with messaging, but it's done with such aesthetic care that it almost feels like art. On the side of a brick building, there is a poster for the upcoming Day of German Art. It features a stylized, heroic figure against a bright blue sky. The colors are primary and bold. Everywhere you look, there are images of health, strength, and unity. But there are other signs, too, smaller ones. On a park bench, there is a small painted strip that says, "Not for Jews." In a shop window, a yellow star has been painted on the glass. Most people walk past these things without stopping. They have developed a kind of selective blindness. If you don't look at the sign, it's as if the sign doesn't exist. If you don't speak to the neighbor who is packing a suitcase, you don't have to ask where they are going. The air is filled with the sound of a loudspeaker mounted on a pole. It's broadcasting a speech from a local official. The voice is distorted, echoing off the stone walls of the buildings. It sounds like a ghost. The community, the blood, the future. The words wash over the pedestrians, who are busy rushing home for dinner. Propaganda in the mid-1930s wasn't just about changing what people thought. It was about changing what they noticed. It was about filling the world with so much noise and so much color that the quiet, dark corners were easy to ignore. Evening arrives. The street lamps, gaslit in many areas, flicker to life with a soft whoosh and a warm yellow glow. The families are back inside. The children are doing their homework. Their history book tells them that Germany was stabbed in the back in 1918, and that a great man has saved them from the brink of ruin. The children believe this implicitly, the way they believe the sun will rise. They haven't seen anything else. To them, the red flags and the marches are as natural as the trees in the park. In the living room, the father smokes a pipe. The scent of cherry tobacco fills the room, sweet and heavy. He listens to the radio, not the speeches tonight, but a recording of a Wagner opera. The music is soaring, dramatic, and deeply German. It makes him feel proud. It makes him feel like he is part of a grand tradition. There is a knock at the door. It's the block warden, the block ward. He is a neighbor, a man who lived 3 doors down for years. He's wearing a brown uniform now. He's just checking in, he says. He wants to know if the family has contributed to the latest collection. He looks around the room, his eyes lingering on the bookshelf, the portrait on the wall, the faces of the children. The father smiles. He is polite. He hands over a few coins. The warden nods and leaves. When the door closes, the father leans his back against it for a moment. He is breathing a little faster. He hasn't done anything wrong. He is a good citizen. But the presence of the warden is a reminder that the national community is always watching. The walls of his home, once thick and private, now feel a little bit thinner. As we reach the end of this day in 1936, we see a country that has settled into a deep, collective trance. It is a world of routines, of morning coffee, of office work, of school lessons, and evening radio. The tragedy of this period isn't that life was constantly terrifying. The tragedy is that life was so normal. People fell in love. They worried about their teeth. They celebrated birthdays. They went to the cinema to see the latest films starring Zara Leander. They accepted the minor cruelties of the regime as the necessary cost of this normalcy. They told themselves that the camps were just for criminals and troublemakers. They told themselves that the restrictions on certain people were temporary. This evening, our focus isn't on the headlines of the time, but on the internal world of the individual. We are going to explore the psychology of the workplace, the classroom, and the social circle. We're looking at the small compromise, those tiny, almost invisible moments where an ordinary person decides to stay quiet, to nod their head, or to look at the floor rather than into the eyes of a friend. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the air enter your lungs and leave just as easily. There is no tension here. We are just observers, drifting like smoke through the streets of the past. Let the world of today dissolve. The hum of your fan or the distant sound of traffic is now the low thrum of a factory or the scratch of a fountain pen on paper. We are going back to 1937 and 1938, a time when the regime had become the very air people breathed. Imagine the sound of a city waking up in 1937. It's a mechanical sound. The gears of the nation are turning faster now. We find ourselves at the gates of a large industrial plant, perhaps a steel mill in the Ruhr Valley or a chemical works on the outskirts of Frankfurt. The workers arrive in a sea of grey and blue caps. There is a specific smell here, a mixture of ozone, hot metal, and stale tobacco. As the men pass through the gates, they pass a large wooden board. It's decorated with slogans about the honor of labor. In this world, you are no longer just a welder or a lathe operator. You are a soldier of the workbench. Inside the factory, the atmosphere is heavy. It's not just the weight of the machinery, it's the weight of the social expectations. In the break room, the walls are covered in notices from the Dafür Deutsche Arbeitsfront, German Labor Front. They organize the strength through joy trips we talked about. But they also keep files. If you are a worker here, you've learned the art of the double life. On the outside, you are the perfect employee. You attend the mandatory meetings. You contribute to the collections. You use the correct greetings. But inside, your thoughts are your own. You might remember the old trade union meetings, the ones where you could speak your mind. Now, you keep your eyes on the metal in front of you. Listen to the rhythmic clack hiss of the steam press. It's hypnotic. It drowns out conversation. For many, the noise of the factory was a relief. In the noise, you didn't have to talk. You didn't have to perform. You could just disappear into the work. You tell yourself that as long as you produce your quota, you are safe. You are a good German. You are providing for your family. And in the 1930s, for a man who remembered the hunger of the Depression, providing for your family was the ultimate moral justification. Let's transition from the loud factory floor to the quiet, carpeted halls of a government ministry or a large insurance office in Berlin. The air here is different. It smells of floor wax, old parchment, and the faint, bitter scent of ink. The only sounds are the rhythmic ticker-ticker-ticker of typewriters and the occasional muffled ring of a heavy black telephone. If you are a clerk in this office, your day is defined by files. Thousands of them. Buff-colored folders tied with string. These files contain the lives of your fellow citizens, their lineages, their associations, their medical histories. You sit at your desk and you process the paperwork. You don't think about the people behind the names. You think about the calligraphy. You think about the straightness of the margins. This was the great small compromise of the middle class, the retreat into professionalism. If you did your job well, if the files were organized and the stamps were clear, you could convince yourself that you weren't. responsible for what the files actually meant. You notice that a colleague's desk is empty one Monday morning. He was a quiet man, someone who liked to talk about his roses. No one mentions his absence. You look at the empty chair, and for a second, a cold shiver runs down your spine. But then, the supervisor walks in. You immediately lower your head. You pick up your pen. You dip it into the inkwell. The scratch of the nib on the paper is the only sound you allow yourself to hear in this office. Neutrality is a survival strategy. To be neutral is to be invisible, and to be invisible is to be safe. You become a master of the blank expression. You learn to smile with your mouth, but not your eyes. By the time the clock strikes 5, your face feels like a mask that has been glued on too tight. Let's move to a school in a quiet residential neighborhood. The sun is streaming through tall, arched windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. In the classroom, the teacher, a man who perhaps loved Goethe and Schiller in his youth, is now standing before a map of Europe. He is pointing out the lost territories. He is talking about living space. The children listen with wide, trusting eyes. For them, the teacher is the voice of truth. But if you look closely at the teacher's hands, you might see them trembling slightly as he holds the chalk. He knows that among his 30 students, there are several whose parents are high-ranking party members. He knows that one wrong word, one slip of the tongue about the importance of universal humanism could result in a visit from the authorities, so he makes his compromise. He teaches the curriculum. He uses the new textbooks. He tells himself that he is protecting the children by staying in his post, rather than letting a radical take his place. He tells himself he is a bridge to the past, even as he builds the road to the future. The children go out for recess. They play games of scouts and border guards. They are vibrant, full of energy, and completely unaware of the tension in their teacher's heart. The tragedy of the era wasn't just in what was taught, but in the silence of what was not taught. The silence was where the old world went to die. As the workday ends, people gather in the Bierstuben, the local pubs. The air is thick with the smell of hops and roasted malt. Imagine sitting in a wooden booth. The wood is dark, stained by decades of spilled beer and pipe smoke. You are with friends you've known since childhood, but the conversation is different now. It's thin. In the past, you might have argued about politics until the early hours of the morning. Now, you talk about the local football team. You talk about the new movie at the UFA Palace. You talk about the weather. Every so often, there is a pause in the conversation. Someone says something that could be interpreted as a criticism of the local Gauleiter. The silence that follows is deafening. It's a physical weight. You see your friends look down at their beer steins. Someone clears their throat and changes the subject. This is how friendships began to fray. It wasn't through betrayal, but through the accumulation of things that couldn't be said. You realize that you don't truly know what your best friend thinks anymore, and he doesn't know what you think. You are both performing for each other, playing the roles of contented citizens. As you walk home in the twilight, the street lamps casting long, flickering shadows, you feel a profound sense of loneliness. You are surrounded by millions of people, all of them saluting the same flag, all of them singing the same songs, yet everyone is an island. The national community was, in many ways, the loneliest place on earth. Back in the apartment, the evening routine begins. The mother is darning socks by the light of a single lamp. The father is reading a book, perhaps a classic, something written before the new era. This was a form of internal emigration. It was the act of retreating into one's own soul, into literature, into music, or into the family. You tell yourself that as long as you keep your home pure from the outside world, you are resisting, but even here, the regime intrudes. There is a knock at the door, a neighbor asking for a signature on a petition, or a radio broadcast that you are required to listen to. You make the small compromises. You sign the paper. You turn up the radio. You tell yourself, it doesn't matter. It's just a signature. My heart is still my own. But every time you sign, every time you nod, a little piece of that inner fortress crumbles. Imagine the texture of the pen in your hand, the weight of the ink, the way the paper feels under your palm. It's such a small act, but it's the cumulative effect of these millions of small acts that allowed the machinery of the state to grind forward. There were no monsters in the hallway, just people who were tired, people who were afraid, people who wanted to protect their children, people who hoped that if they just stayed quiet a little longer, the storm would pass over them. As the night deepens, the city grows quiet, but it is a watchful quiet. In the 1930s, the regime began to introduce consecrations, new rituals to replace the old religious ones. There were ceremonies for name-givings, for marriages, for the harvest. They were designed to feel ancient, to feel eternal. Imagine a night rally in a city square. Thousands of people holding torches. The flames lick at the dark sky, casting an orange glow on the stone facades of the buildings. The sound of the drums are deep. Primal thump 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 vibrates in your chest. For many, this was a spiritual experience. It filled the void left by the old world. It offered a sense of meaning that was larger than the individual. As you watch from your window, you might feel a pull toward it, a desire to stop being lonely, a desire to join the fire and the drums. We find ourselves now at the threshold of a new chapter, drifting into the late 1930s, a time when the golden afternoon of peace began to take on a sharper, more metallic chill. As you settle deeper into the warmth of your bed, let your thoughts move toward the children. Imagine the world through the eyes of someone small, someone for whom the banners, the songs, and the uniforms were not political choices, but simply the scenery of their childhood. The air in our story tonight is filled with the scent of pine needles, campfires, and the starch of clean laundry. We are looking at the transformation of the German youth, not through the lens of a historian, but through the sensory experiences of a boy or a girl, growing up in a world that was being rebuilt specifically for them. Imagine the sound of a wooden whistle, sharp and clear, cutting through the morning mist of a village square. It is 1938. To a 10-year-old boy, this whistle isn't a call to submission. It is a call to adventure. He stands in a row with 30 other boys, all wearing the same tan shirts and black shorts. The morning air is cool on his knees. He feels a sense of immense pride in the neatness of his neckerchief and the polished sheen of his belt buckle. To him, the uniform is a suit of armor. It erases the fact that his father is a lowly clerk or that his family struggles to buy meat. In this circle, he is a jungfolk member. He is part of a brotherhood. The ritual of the morning salute is performed with the earnestness that only a child can muster. There is no irony in his heart. He looks up at the flag as it rises against the pale blue sky, and he feels a swell of emotion that he doesn't have the words to describe. It is a feeling of belonging to something ancient and powerful. The teacher, or the troop leader, speaks of duty and sacrifice. These are big, heavy words, but to the boy, They taste like candy. They make him feel tall. They make his small life feel like a grand epic. He doesn't see the politics behind the words. He only sees the sun on the flag and the straight lines of his friends. Across the way, the girls of the BDM, the Bond Deutsche Magdala gathering. Their world is different, focused on a soft, rhythmic grace. Imagine the sound of 20 voices singing a folk song in harmony. The melody is old, a tune their grandmothers might have hummed, but the lyrics have been subtly altered to speak of the eternal German mother. A girl of 12 stands in the circle. She wears a white blouse and a dark skirt. Her hair is braided tightly, a crown of blonde or brown that feels heavy and serious on her head. Her day is filled with gymnastics, weaving, and learning the properties of herbs. She is taught that her body is a vessel for the future of the nation. She finds a deep, meditative peace in the craftwork. The rhythmic clack-clack of the loom or the steady stitch of a needle through linen provides a sense of order. In a world that felt chaotic only a few years ago, this structure is comforting. She isn't thinking about war. She is thinking about the perfect symmetry of her embroidery. She is thinking about the praise of her leader. But sometimes, when the singing stops, she notices her mother watching her from the kitchen window. Her mother's face is a mask of stillness. There is a distance there that the girl cannot bridge. The girl is a product of the new world. Her mother is a ghost of the old one, inside the homes. As the children are out marching and singing, a quiet, heavy anxiety permeates the walls. Imagine a father sitting at the kitchen table, watching his son polish his service dagger. The father remembers a different Germany. He remembers a time when a boy's afternoon was his own, when he could wander the woods without a leader, when he could read whatever books he liked. He sees his son becoming a stranger. The boy uses phrases the father didn't teach him. The boy speaks with a certainty that is terrifying. The father wants to speak up. He wants to say, life is more complicated than a slogan. But he looks at his son's bright, eager eyes, and the words die in his throat. He is afraid of his own child. Not that the boy would intentionally hurt him, but that the boy might mention his father's old-fashioned ideas at the next meeting. This is the great, silent tragedy of the era, the severing of the generational bond. The state has stepped between the parent and the child. The dinner table becomes a place of tactical conversation. The parents talk about the quality of the potatoes or the weather, while the children talk about the new age. The mother busies herself with the laundry. She scrubs the tan shirts until her knuckles are red. She performs the labor of the regime because it is the only way she knows how to love her children. She hopes that if she keeps them clean and fed, the darkness of the world won't touch them. But she knows, in the quiet hours of the night, that she has already lost their minds. Let us return to the classroom, where the ideology is woven into the very fabric of learning. Imagine a biology textbook. It doesn't look like a book of hate. It has beautiful, detailed drawings of oak leaves, beetles, and birds. The child turns the pages, admiring the colors. But the text explains that just as the oak tree must crowd out the weeds to survive, so must the German people purify their surroundings. To a 10-year-old, this sounds like common sense. It sounds like the natural law of the forest. In math class, the problems are about the cost of building a hospital versus the cost of caring for the genetically ill. The child does the long division. He carries the one. He finds the answer. He isn't being taught to be cruel. He is being taught to be logical. The cruelty is hidden in the arithmetic. The child closes his book, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He has learned his lessons. He walks home, kicking a stone along the cobblestones, unaware that his very sense of empathy is being systematically dismantled, one math problem at a time. He feels smart. He feels awake. In the summer, the youth organizations move to the countryside. Imagine the smell of crushed grass and woods. Hundreds of tents, perfectly aligned, dot the hillside, dot at night. The children gather around a massive bonfire. The flames leap high, casting long, dancing shadows against the trees. There is a storyteller. He doesn't tell fairy tales about dragons or witches. He tells stories of soldiers in the trenches of the Great War. He tells stories of the struggle. For the streets of Berlin to the boys sitting in the dirt, the firelight makes everything seem magical. They feel a deep, visceral connection to the earth and to each other. This is the socialism of the trenches being passed down to a generation that has never seen a trench. They sleep in sleeping bags on the hard ground. The discomfort is a badge of honor. They listen to the wind in the pines and feel like they are part of a legendary army. They are being prepared for a future they cannot imagine. But in this moment, they are simply children who love the smell of the forest and the sound of the crackling fire. As the years move toward 1939, the play becomes more serious. The wooden rifles are replaced with real ones for the older boys. The games become maneuvers. The innocence of the early 1930s begins to evaporate, replaced by a cold, professional edge. The girl in the BDM is no longer just sewing. She is learning basic nursing and how to manage a household under siege conditions. The tone of the world has shifted. The music on the radio is more martial. The posters on the walls are no longer about art. They are about watchfulness. Even the children feel it. They stop playing with the neighbors' kids who went away. They stop asking why certain houses are empty. The selective blindness of their parents has become their own. They have learned that some questions have no answers, and that it is better not to ask. Then we find ourselves now at the very end of the 1930s. The sun is setting on a Germany that feels like a coiled spring. Imagine a family standing on their balcony on a warm August evening. The air is heavy with the scent of jasmine and the distant hum of a motorized column moving toward the east. The children are excited. They think it's a parade. The parents are silent. They look at each other in the fading light. They see the uniforms their children are wearing, the uniforms they once thought were just costumes for a club. They realize, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that the world they built to keep their children safe is about to consume them. The father puts his hand on his son's shoulder. The boy is almost as tall as he is now. The boy is looking at the horizon with a look of pure, unadulterated hope. The father wants to weep, but he doesn't. He has forgotten how to show that kind of emotion. Instead, he just stands there, a ghost in his own home. Let the sounds of the marching feet and the crackling bonfires fade away now. The 1930s are closing their eyes. The children we've followed are tucked into their beds. Their uniforms are folded neatly on chairs. Their school books are closed. For a few hours, they are just children, again vulnerable, dreaming and still. You too are drifting now. The complexities of history are sinking beneath the surface of your mind. The weight of the past is lifting, leaving only the quiet of the present moment. Imagine the moon rising over a silent German forest. The trees are dark, their branches heavy with sleep. The world is waiting, but you don't have to wait. You can let go. The year is 1939, turning into 1940. The transition from peace to war did not arrive with a sudden crash for the ordinary person living in a city apartment block. Instead, it arrived as a series of subtle subtractions. The street lights were dimmed, then painted over with dark blue lacquer for the blackout. The shop windows, once glowing with warm yellow light, became dark voids. The world began to shrink, pulling inward, away from the wide-open horizons of the mid-30s and into the cramped, shadowed spaces of the stairwell and the kitchen. As you lie there, feel the stillness of a heavy, velvet curtain being drawn across your mind. We are moving into the interior world of the tenement building, the meats. These were tall, stone buildings with echoing hallways and thick walls that held 1,000 secrets. Imagine the scent of an apartment hallway in Berlin or Hamburg during the first winter of the war. It is a mixture of damp wool, boiled cabbage, and the faint, cold smell of stone dust. The elevators, if the building has them, are often silent now to save electricity. People move up and down the stairs with a new kind of rhythm, hurried, soft-footed scuttle. In every one of these buildings, there is a figure who has become the unofficial shadow of the hallway, the blockward or blockwarden. He is often an older man, perhaps someone too old for the front, wearing a brown uniform that fits a little too tightly around the waist. He carries a clipboard. He knows exactly how many people live in 4B. He knows who receives mail from abroad. He knows whose radio is played a little too loudly after the sun goes down. If you are a resident in this building, you hear his footsteps. They are heavy, deliberate. When you hear them approaching your door, you find yourself holding your breath. You aren't doing anything wrong. You are sitting in your chair, mending a garment, or reading by a shielded lamp. But the mere presence of the watchman creates a physical sensation in your chest, a tightening, a small spark of static electricity along your skin. This is the birth of the policed soul. It is the moment when you realize that your home is no longer a fortress. The walls have ears, and the keyholes have eyes. You begin to look at your apartment not as a sanctuary, but as a stage where you must perform the role of the good citizen, even when you are alone. As the sun dips below the horizon, the city must disappear. This is the law of the Verdenkelung, the blackout. Every window must be covered with thick, black paper or heavy fabric. Not a single sliver of light can escape to guide an enemy bomber. Think about the tactile experience of this ritual. The paper is coarse and stiff. You use thumbtacks to pin it to the wooden frames. The sound thud 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 goes in the quiet room. Once the windows are sealed, the atmosphere changes. The room becomes smaller, warmer, and more stifling. The air grows heavy with the smell of the oil lamp or the small electric bulb. Inside this blacked-out box, the family gathers, but the conversation has changed. In the early 30s, there was laughter. Now, there is a low, constant murmur. Voices are kept at a level just above a whisper. You have learned that sound travels through the ventilation shafts and the plumbing. A joke made in the kitchen can be heard in the apartment below. You sit at the table, and you find yourself looking at the wall shared with your neighbor. You've known the woman in 3C for 5 years. You've shared sugar and news of the children. But now, when you see her in the hallway, you only nod. You don't ask how her husband is. You don't ask why she looked red-eyed yesterday. Curiosity has become a dangerous commodity. To ask a question is to invite one in return. In the corner of the room, the Volksempfänger radio still sits. But there is a new danger associated with it. The regime has made it a capital offense to listen to foreign broadcasts, the enemy stations. like the BBC. Imagine the father of the house. It is 10 p.m. The children are asleep. He moves toward the radio. His movements are slow, underwater. He reaches for the dial. He doesn't turn it quickly. He nudges it, millimeter by millimeter. The glowing amber eye of the radio seems to watch him. He presses his ear against the speaker fabric. He turns the volume down so low that it is barely a vibration. Through the static, through the deliberate jamming signals of the state, a voice emerges. A calm, British voice. It speaks of defeats that the German newspapers don't mention. It speaks of a world that looks very different from the one described by the Ministry of Propaganda. The father feels a rush of adrenaline. It is a small act of rebellion, but it carries the weight of a death sentence. He is terrified, yet he cannot stop. He needs to know. He needs to feel a connection to a reality that isn't manufactured by the state. Suddenly, there is a floorboard creak in the hallway outside. He snaps the radio off. The silence that follows is absolute. He sits in the dark, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Was it the warden? Was it the neighbor? He waits for the knock on the door. Minutes pass. The silence stretches. Eventually, he realizes it was just the building settling in the cold. But the fear remains. It stays in his marrow, a cold, permanent resident. The stairwell, a gauntlet of glances. Morning comes, and the black paper is taken down. The grey light of a winter morning filters in. You prepare to go to work. Leaving the apartment is like entering a theatre. As you step onto the landing, you adjust your coat. You smooth your hair. You put on your public face, a mask of neutral, quiet determination. In the stairwell, you encounter the neighbor from the top floor. He is a young man, a party member who wears his uniform with a sharp, aggressive pride. You raise your arm. Heil Hitler, you say. The words are hollow, a coin tossed into a fountain. He returns the greeting, his eyes scanning your shoes, your bag, the expression in your eyes. He isn't looking at you as a neighbor. He is looking at you as a data point. Are you enthusiastic? Are you tired? Are you suspicious? You walk past him, feeling the heat of his gaze on your back. You descend the stone steps, your heels clicking clack, clack, clack. You realize that the greatest weapon of the regime isn't the Gestapo. It is the suspicion it has planted between ordinary people. The regime has turned every citizen into a party policeman. You reach the heavy oak door of the building and step out into the street. The air is cold, and for a moment you feel a sense of relief to be in the wind. But even here, the posters watch you. The enemy is listening, they say. Shame on the grumblers. The city has become a labyrinth of warnings. The grocery store. The language of scarcity. Let us follow a woman. As she goes to the local grocery store, the shop is small, with wooden counters and shelves that are becoming increasingly bare. The smell is of dried herbs and sawdust. There is a queue. People stand in silence, clutching their ration cards. These little slips of paper have become more valuable than currency. They are the measure of your life. So many grams of fats, so many grams of meat, so many eggs. In the queue, the small conversations happen. But they are coded. No one says, the war is going badly. Instead, they say, the coffee substitute is very bitter this week, isn't it? No one says, I hate the regime. They say, it's a shame about the coal shortage. You listen to the woman in front of you. She is talking about her son on the Eastern Front. She speaks in the approved clichés, doing his duty. for the fatherland. But her voice trembles. You want to reach out and touch her arm. You want to say, I am scared for my son, too. But you don't. You look at the back of her coat. You maintain the distance. If you show too much sympathy, it might be seen as defeatism. If you show too much grief, it might be seen as a lack of faith in the final victory. So you stay silent. You study the cracks in the pavement. You wait for your turn at the counter. The grocer is a man you've known for 20 years. He used to tell jokes. Now he is efficient and grim. He snips the stamps from your card with a sharp snips. He hands you a small parcel wrapped in grey paper. You nod, you leave. The transaction is purely mechanical. The warmth of the community has been replaced by the cold gears of the state. The internal exile by the evening. You are back in your apartment. The blackout paper is back up. The world is sealed out. You sit in the dim light, and you realize that you have begun to live a life of internal exile. You have retreated so far into yourself that you are a stranger even to your own family. You don't tell your wife about the radio. She doesn't tell you about the things she heard in the breadline. You are both protecting each other, but in doing so, you are building a wall of silence in the middle of your marriage. You look at your children. They are playing on the floor with toy soldiers. They speak the language of the schools full of sharp edges and absolute certainties. You love them, but you are also afraid of them. You wonder what they see when they look at you. Do they see a father? Or do they see a subject who isn't quite enthusiastic enough? This is the most profound cruelty of the regime. It has occupied the most private spaces of the human heart. It has made love feel like a risk. It has made trust feel like a luxury you can no longer afford. You pick up a book. It is a book of poetry from the 19th century. You read the words, and for a moment, the walls of the apartment seem to dissolve. You are in a landscape of beauty, of doubt, of complexity. You are human again. But then a heavy truck rumbles by outside. The year has moved into the early 1940s, and the rhythm of the German household has become a delicate, strained dance. As you sink into the softness of your pillow, imagine the world of the women, the mothers, the daughters, and the grandmothers who remained behind the blacked-out windows, while the men were sent to distant horizons. For the woman of this era, the regime was not just a political force. It was a domestic architect. It reached into her kitchen, her nursery, and her very sense of self. Tonight, we are going to walk through the quiet hallways of her daily life, feeling the texture of the linen she mends and the weight of the silence she carries. There is no need to hurry. The world outside is dark, and we are safe within the slow, steady pulse of the narrative. Imagine the first light of a winter morning, cold and blue, pressing against the heavy blackout curtains. The mother is the first to rise. The apartment is freezing. The coal ration is meager, and the ceramic stove in the corner is only a lukewarm memory of the fire it held the night before. She moves with practiced, quiet efficiency. Her hands are rough from lye soap and the cold, but her movements are graceful. Her first task is the laundry. In the 1940s, cleanliness was elevated to a national virtue. To have a messy home or a stained collar was not just a personal failing. It was seen as a sign of a social tendencies. She picks up her son's Hitler Youth shirt. It is a tan color that has faded slightly from repeated washings. She irons it with a heavy, solid iron heated on the stove. The smell of hot cotton and steam fills the small kitchen. As she presses the pleats, she is performing a ritual of protection. She thinks that if she can make him look exactly like the others, viz. His uniform is the crispest, his soul will be safe. She is a National Socialist mother, a title the state has bestowed upon her like a heavy crown. She is told she is the source of the nation's life, but as she stands in the cold kitchen, she feels more like a ghost. She is tired. Her back aches, but she continues to press the iron down over and over, smoothing out the wrinkles of a world she no longer understands. On the wall of the living room, near a photograph of her husband in his Wehrmacht uniform, hangs a small object, the Mutterkreuz, or the Mother's Cross. It is a beautiful thing, made of bronze, silver or gold, with blue and white enamel. She received it because she has 4 children. She remembers the ceremony where she received it. There was music, and a local official spoke about her heroic contribution to the Reich. For a moment, she felt seen. She felt important. But now, in the quiet of the morning, the cross feels heavy. It represents a contract she never fully realized she was signing. The state has claimed her children. They belong to the organizations, to the schools, and eventually to the front. The cross is a receipt for a debt paid in flesh and blood. She looks at it, and instead of pride, she feels a strange, hollow coldness. She wipes the dust from the enamel with a soft cloth. It is a beautiful medal, but it cannot keep her children warm, and it cannot bring her husband home. She returns to the kitchen to prepare the morning meal. There is no real coffee anymore, only ersatz, a dark, bitter brew made from roasted acorns or chicory. She pours it into a porcelain cup, the steam rising in the dim light. She drinks it standing up, looking out at the grey rooftops of the city. She is the anchor of this home, the one who must remain steady while the world drifts into the abyss. By mid-morning, she is out in the streets, a string bag clutched in her hand. The act of shopping has become a test of endurance and moral character. The German housewife is expected to be a master of economy. She must cook nutritious meals from scraps. She must waste nothing. The queue at the butcher's is long and silent. Standing in line is where the women of the regime truly live. It is a space of shared hardship and shared suspicion. You watch the woman in front of you. Is she using black market coupons? Does she have a piece of real butter hidden in her bag? The pressure to be exemplary is constant. If you complain about the lack of eggs, you are a grumbler. If you look too sad, you are a defeatist. So, you maintain a face of stone. You talk about the recipes you've found for faux cutlets made of grain and herbs. You exchange tips on how to turn an old coat into a pair of trousers for a growing boy. But beneath the talk of recipes, there is a deep, unspoken grief. Every woman in this line is waiting for a letter. Every woman is terrified of the telegram. When a neighbor's husband is killed, the women in the building gather. They don't wail. They bring a loaf of bread. They sit in silence. They nod. The regime has taught them that grief must be disciplined. To cry too loudly is to fail the national spirit. You walk home with your small parcel of grey-coloured meat, feeling the weight of the city on your shoulders. The cobblestones feel harder than they used to. The air feels thinner. You are a heroine of the home front, but you would give all the medals in the world for a single hour of the life you had 10 years ago. In the afternoon, the children return from school. The mother's role changes again. She must now be the ideological guardian of the home. The children bring home their lessons. They talk about racial science and the heroism of the soldier. The mother listens, nodding where she must. She helps them with their homework, her finger tracing the Gothic script of their textbooks. Sometimes, A child asks a question that makes her heart stop. Mother, why did the Jewish family in the attic move away? Or mother, is it true that the leader never sleeps because he is thinking of us? She has to choose her words like she is walking through a minefield. She looks at the innocent, eager face of her child, the child she carried and birth-tanned. She realizes she cannot be entirely honest. To be honest is to put the child in danger. To be honest is to invite the state into the living room. So, she gives the approved answer. She tells the official story. She watches the light of curiosity fade into the light of acceptance in her child's eyes. This is her most painful compromise. She is protecting their bodies by sacrificing their minds. She feels a deep sense of shame, a bitter taste in the back of her throat, but she swallows it. She pours more soup into their bowls. She tells them to eat, to grow strong, to be good. As the sun sets and the blackout paper is pinned to the windows, the mother returns to her chair. This is the hour of mending. The room is silent, save for the ticking of the clock and the soft hiss of the gas lamp. She has a basket of clothes that need repair. In the 1940s, nothing was thrown away. Every sock was darned until it was more thread than wool. Every sheet was turned sides to middle. There is a meditative quality to this work. The needle moves in and out, in and out. It is a small, controlled act of creation in a world of destruction. As she sews, her mind wanders. She thinks of her husband. She remembers the way he used to laugh before his face became set in the grim mask of the soldier. She wonders if he is cold. She wonders if he is still the man she married. She writes a letter to him. The paper is thin and grey. She writes about the children's grades. She writes about the garden. She does not write about her fear. She does not write about the way her heart jumps every time the doorbell rings. She writes a soldier's letter, bright, encouraging, and empty. She licks the envelope, the glue tasting of chemicals. She sets it on the table. It is a paper bridge thrown across a chasm of fire. She hopes it reaches him. She hopes it reminds him that he has a home to return to, even if that home is now a place of shadows and secrets. Even in the middle of the war, there was a strange pressure on women to remain feminine and beautiful. The regime frowned upon makeup, calling it French or decadent, but it encouraged a healthy, natural glow. Imagine the mother looking at herself in a small, cracked mirror. She sees the lines around her eyes, the grey in her hair. She tries to pinch her cheeks to bring some color to them. She uses a little bit of beetroot juice for her lips. She does this not out of vanity, but out of a sense of duty. She is told that she must be the light of the home, a source of beauty and comfort for the men when they return. She must be the eternal woman. But as she looks at her reflection, she sees the toll of the years. She sees the quiet burden. She is the one who carries the weight of the rations, the weight of the air raids, the weight of the propaganda, and the weight of the silent, growing doubt. She is the one who keeps the machinery of the normal running when everything else is falling apart. She is exhausted, but she straightens her collar, pins her hair, and turns back to the room. Finally, the children are in bed. The apartment is quiet. The mother stands in the middle of the dark living room. She doesn't pray to the state. She doesn't pray to the Fora. She reaches back to a God she isn't sure is still listening. She whispers a prayer for her children's safety. She whispers a prayer for the end of the noise. She looks at the mutterkrios on the wall, shining dimly in the moonlight that leaks through a gap in the blackout paper. It looks like a star, but a cold one. She moves to her own bed, the sheets cold and crisp. She lies there, her eyes open, listening to the city. She listens for the sound of the sirens, the sound of the wind, the sound of the world breathing. The year is 1941, stretching into 1942. The seasons turn with their usual indifference, but the human landscape of the city has begun to undergo a quiet, chilling transformation. As you settle into the stillness of your room, let your mind drift back to the streets we have walked before. The cobblestones are the same, the steeply pitched roofs still catch the moonlight. But there is a new quality to the silence. It is no longer a peaceful silence. It is a silence born of absence. Tonight, we observe the quiet disappearance. We are looking at the empty spaces left behind in the fabric of the neighborhood, the shops with the shades drawn, the apartments where the lights no longer flicker on at dusk, and the subtle, collective decision of a population to look everywhere but at the truth. Take a deep, slow breath. Feel the coolness of the air. We are moving through this history with a soft footfall, as if we are walking through a library after hours. We are here to witness the small, human moments that the history books often skip over in favor of grander, louder tragedies. Imagine a local tavern, a place where men have gathered for decades to drink beer and talk about the neighborhood. The wood of the tables is dark and polished by the sleeves of 1,000 coats. In the corner, there is a table reserved for the regulars, the Stammtisch. For years, a man named Herr Steiner sat in the third chair from the left. He was a watchmaker, a man with delicate hands and a quiet laugh. He had lived in the building across the street since the Great War, but one evening his chair is empty, and the next evening, and the week after that, the other men at the table notice. Of course they notice. They see the dust beginning to settle on the spot where his beer stein used to rest. But no one asks, where is Steiner? Instead, they talk about the price of tobacco. They talk about the news from the front in North Africa. They focus very intently on the foam in their glasses. This is the unspoken pact. To ask about the missing is to admit that they are gone. To admit they are gone is to acknowledge the trucks that come in the middle of the night, the muffled voices on the stairs, the heavy thud of a suitcase, the sound of a door being locked for the last time. The men at the table feel a coldness in the room that the ceramic stove cannot reach. They know, in the deep lizard brain part of their consciousness, they know exactly what is happening. But the regime has made knowledge a burden. To know is to be responsible. To be silent is to be safe. So they drink their beer, they nod to one another, and they leave the third chair empty, a silent monument to a friend they have decided to forget. Now, imagine walking down a residential street on a Tuesday morning. There was once a small haberdashery on the corner, a place where you could buy buttons, thread, and lace. It was owned by an elderly couple who always had a kind word for the children. The shop is closed now, but it isn't closed for the day. It is closed with a finality that is visible in the layer of soot on the windows. A small official notice is taped to the glass, but the ink has faded in the sun. Behind the glass, you can see the rolls of fabric still sitting on the shelves, their colors muted by the shadow. As a neighbor, you walk past this shop every day. You used to go in once a week. Now, as you approach the corner, you find yourself crossing to the other side of the street. It's an unconscious movement. You don't want to see the dust. You don't want to see the Judah painted on the brickwork, now peeling and weathered. The shop becomes a ghost. After a month, you stop noticing it altogether. Your brain simply edits it out of the landscape. It becomes a blank spot, a hole in the world. You tell yourself that they moved away to stay with relatives. You tell yourself they were resettled for work. You build a wall of comforting lies in your mind, brick by brick, until you can walk past the corner without your heart rate changing at all. The most intimate theater of this disappearance was the apartment building. As you lie in your bed, imagine the sounds of a tenement at 3 a.m. Usually, the building is silent, save for the ticking of clocks and the occasional groan of the pipes. But then, you hear it. A truck idling in the street below, a low rhythmic thrumming that vibrates through the floorboards. Then, the heavy front door of the building opens. You hear footsteps on the stone stairs. They aren't the hurried light footsteps of a neighbor coming home late. They are heavy, measured, and synchronized. In apartment 3B, a family is awake. You can hear the muffled sound of a child crying, quickly silenced. You hear the sharp, metallic click of a key in a lock. There are no raised voices. There is no drama. Just the sound of furniture being moved, the shuffling of feet, and then the slow, heavy descent back down the stairs. Inside your own apartment, you are wide awake. Your eyes are fixed on the ceiling. Beside you, your spouse is also awake, though neither of you moves. You are both pretending to be asleep, even to each other. You listen to the truck door slam shut. You listen to the engine rev and then fade away into the distance. The silence that returns is different. It is heavier. It is the silence of a building that has lost a piece of itself. You feel a profound sense of shame, a physical weight in your gut. You want to get up. You want to look out the window, but you don't. You stay under your quilt, paralyzed by the realization that your safety is bought with your silence. You are a witness who refuses to see. A few days later, the disappeared apartment is opened. A different group of men arrives. They are bureaucrats, not soldiers. They carry clipboards and pens. They begin the process of securing the assets. They move through the rooms, counting the spoons, the chairs, the blankets, and the books. They label everything with the cold efficiency of an estate sale. From your doorway, you might catch a glimpse of the life that was lived there. You see a child's toy left on the floor. You see a half-finished cup of coffee on the nightstand, now dry and cracked. These are the mundane artifacts of a human existence, the ordinary life that we have been exploring. Later, the items are brought down to the street. A winter relief truck arrives to take the furniture. You see the wardrobe that you admired for years being hoisted onto the back of a lorry. You see the rugs being rolled up. Perhaps you are offered the chance to buy some of these things. For the benefit of the community, they say. It is a temptation of the most subtle kind. You need a new table. Yours is broken and old. Here is a beautiful oak table, practically new, for a fraction of its value. If you take the table, you have become a part of the machine. You have literally brought the disappearance into your own home. You sit at the table and eat your soup, and for a moment, you wonder whose elbows rested on this wood last month. But then you push the thought away. It's a good table, you tell yourself. It shouldn't go to waste. This is how the regime turned ordinary people into accomplices, not through grand crimes, but through the small domestic desire for a better table. As the months go by, the language people use begins to change. The missing neighbors are no longer the Rosenthals or the Levies. They are the evacuated. They have been sent to the East. The word East becomes a magical place in the German imagination. It is a place of endless labor, of new colonies, and of reorganization. No one asks for a map. No one asks for an address. The East is simply a direction where the uncomfortable truths are sent to vanish. In the schools. The children are told that the world is being cleaned. They use the language of hygiene. They talk about weeding the garden. To a child, this sounds positive. It sounds like progress. They don't see the faces of their playmates who no longer come to school. They only see the bright, shiny future promised by the posters. The parents hear these words coming from their children's mouths and they feel a stab of horror. But they don't correct them. To correct a child is to risk the child repeating your words to a teacher. So, the parents nod. They let the euphemisms stand. They allow the language of the state to overwrite the language of their hearts. By 1942, the visual landscape of the city has been scrubbed. The Jewish signs on the benches are gone because the benches themselves are often gone. Or the people who sat on them are no longer there to be excluded. The yellow stars, which appeared with such jarring cruelty on the coats of neighbors a year ago, are now gone from the streets. You no longer have to feel that prickle of guilt when you pass someone in the grocery store wearing a badge of shame, because they are no longer in the grocery store. The world feels tidy. It feels uniform. But if you have a memory, the city feels like a toothless mouth. There are gaps everywhere. There is a gap in the orchestra. There is a gap in the medical clinic. There is a gap in the university lecture hall. You walk through the park and you realize that the air feels different. There is less laughter. There is less debate. The vibrant, messy, complicated tapestry of German life has been replaced by a flat, monochromatic surface. It is a piece of the graveyard, but as long as you don't look at the headstones, you can pretend it is just a quiet afternoon. This period marks the beginning of the internal blackout. Just as you pin the black paper over your windows at night, you begin to pin it over your own memory. The year is 1943. The early, confident years of the regime have faded into a grey, persistent reality of endurance. As you settle into the cradle of your bed, imagine the world slowing down to the pace of a long, cold winter. The grand promises of the past have been replaced by the immediate. Tactile struggle for the basics of life, a bit of warmth, a loaf of bread, and a letter from a distant land. Tonight, we explore the routine of war. We are looking at how a nation learns to live in the shadow of the sirens, how the extraordinary becomes the mundane, and how the human spirit adapts to a world where the horizon is always obscured by smoke. Let your breathing slow. Let the tension in your shoulders melt into the mattress. We are stepping into a time of quiet, weary persistence. Imagine the kitchen table on a Monday morning. It is no longer a place of abundance, but a place of careful, mathematical calculation. Before you are the ration card, small, colorful sheets of paper divided into tiny squares. Each square represents a few grams of fat, a slice of bread, or a spoonful of sugar. If you are the one responsible for the household, these cards are your most precious possession. You handle them with more care than money. Money has become secondary. It is the points on the card that determine if your children will go to bed with a full stomach. The morning ritual involves a pair of kitchen scissors. You snip away a tiny square of paper for the day's bread. The sound is a sharp snip, a small punctuation mark in the silence. You look at the remaining squares and you play a mental game of chess. If we eat less today, can we have a small cake for the daughter's birthday on Thursday? If we skip the butter this morning, can we sort an onion tonight? The food itself has changed. The bread is dark, heavy, and increasingly filled with extenders, sawdust, potato flour, or bean meal. It has a sour, earthy smell that lingers in the back of the throat. You slice it thin, so thin you can almost see the grain of the wooden table through it. You spread a layer of artificial honey or a scrape of lard. This is the war of the kitchen. It is a slow, grinding battle against hunger. But as you eat your meager breakfast, you find yourself becoming strangely accustomed to it. The memory of real coffee, of thick steaks, of bowls of cream. It begins to feel like a fairy tale. Your world has shrunk to the size of a ration stamp, and you find a strange, quiet pride in making those stamps last until the end of the month. After the morning meal, the most important moment of the day arrives, the visit from the postman. You listen for the sound of his footsteps in the hall. In 1943, the postman is often an older man or a woman in a blue uniform, their bag heavy with the weight of 1,000,000 heartaches. When a letter from the front arrives, a felt post, the world stops. You sit in your chair and you run your thumb over the paper. It is often rough, grey, and soiled with the dust of a place you have never seen. The steppes of Russia, the mountains of Italy, or the deserts of Africa. You open it carefully, trying not to tear the edges. The handwriting is familiar, yet it has changed. It is hurried, sometimes shaky. The words are censored, both by the state and by the soldier himself. He doesn't tell you about the cold that freezes the oil in the trucks. He doesn't tell you about the sound of the Katyusha rockets. Instead, he asks about the garden. He asks if the dog is still healthy. He tells you to stay brave. You read the letter 3, 4, 5 times. You look for the hidden language between the lines. You search for a sign that he is still the man you know. For those few minutes, the war disappears. You are not in a blacked-out apartment. You are with him, walking in the woods or sitting in a cafe. But when you finish, the silence of the room returns, heavier than before. You place the letter in a wooden box, alongside dozens of others tied with string. This box is the true heart of the German home in 1943. It is a library of hope and a ledger of fear. You tell yourself that as long as the letters keep coming, the world is still turning. You don't allow yourself to think about the empty boxes in the apartments next door by the afternoon. The routine of the war moves from the private to the public. You hear the sound of a bell ringing in the street. It is not a fire, but a drill. The regime has turned the civilian population into a home front army. Everyone has a role. You are a self-protection warden for your floor. You have a tin helmet and a gas mask in a metal canister. You have a bucket of sand and a long-handled shovel near the door. The drills are conducted with a weary, professional air. You lead your neighbors down to the cellar. The cellar has been reinforced with thick wooden beams that smell of damp pine. There are benches along the walls and a small first aid kit in a wooden box. In the early years, the drills were an exciting novelty. Now, they are a chore. You sit on the hard bench in the dim light of a single bulb. You talk to the elderly woman from the first floor about the quality of her knitting. You listen to the children whispering. You are taught how to deal with an incendiary bomb. Don't use water, the manual says. Smother it with sand. You practice the movements. You handle the shovel. You learn the geometry of fire. You tell yourself that you are ready. You have to believe that a bucket of sand can stop the sky from falling. The siren sounds the all clear, a long, steady tone that feels like a sigh of relief. You climb the stairs back to your apartment. You put your helmet away. The drill is over, but the feeling of being a target remains. It is a low-frequency hum in the back of your mind, a realization that the front is no longer 1,000 miles away. It is directly above your head. For many women and older men, the afternoon is spent in the factories. The total war decree of early 1943 has mobilized everyone. The small dress shops and luxury boutiques are gone, replaced by workshops producing uniform buttons, gas mask filters, or shell casings. Imagine the sound of a factory floor. It is a relentless, metallic roar. The smell is of hot grease and iron filings. You stand at a machine for 10 hours a day. Your hands, once soft, are now stained with oil that no soap can fully remove. There is a strange, hypnotic quality to the work. You pick up a piece of metal. You place it in the machine. You pull a lever, clack, hiss. You remove the piece. You do it again, and again, and again. You don't think about what the piece of metal is for. You don't think about the destruction it will cause. You focus on the rhythm. In the rhythm, there is a kind of peace. It prevents you from thinking. It prevents you from worrying about the bread stamps or the letters from the front. You become a part of the machine, a single cell in the industrial body of the state. The propaganda posters on the walls tell you that your work is the weapon. You look at them, but you don't really see them. You see the clock. You see the end of the shift. You see the chance to go home, to take off your heavy shoes, and to sit in the dark for an hour before sleep. As you walk home from the factory, the city is a world of silhouettes. The blackout is now absolute. There are no The only light comes from the moon or the stars, reflecting off the white-painted edges of the curbs and the trunks of the trees. You navigate by memory and by touch. You know that there are 10 steps to the corner, then a turn past the fountain. You hear the footsteps of other people, but you don't see them. You are a collection of ghosts, moving through a landscape that is slowly being reclaimed by the night. The city feels ancient, as if the modern world has been stripped away. Without the neon signs and the glowing shop windows, Berlin or Munich looks like it might have looked 300 years ago. There is a strange beauty in it, the way the starlight hits the stone of the cathedral, the way the wind whispers through the empty squares. But it is a cold beauty. It is the beauty of a world that has forgotten how to be human. You reach your building and you feel for the heavy iron handle of the door. You step into the hallway and the smell of the cellar and the cabbage greets you like an old, tired friend. By late 1943, the evening often involves a trip to the shelter for real. The sirens, wailer rising and falling tone that sets the dogs to barking and the heart to racing. You don't rush. You have a shelter bag packed and ready by the door. It contains your papers, your valuables, a change of clothes, and a few pieces of hard bread. You move down the stairs with your neighbors. The atmosphere is quiet, almost somber. In the cellar, the light is dim. You sit and wait. You listen. You learn to distinguish the sounds. The distant thud-thud of the anti-aircraft guns, the flak, the low, vibrating hum of the bombers, a sound like a swarm of angry bees. You look at the people around you. There is the baker who lost his shop. There is the young mother whose husband is in. There is the child who has never known a world without sirens. You are bound together by a shared vulnerability. The national community of the propaganda rallies has been replaced by the shelter community of the basement. In this space, the differences of class and rank disappear. Everyone is equally afraid. Everyone is equally dusty. You share a piece of bread. You hold a neighbor's hand. You tell stories of the time before. This is the most authentic form of human connection left in the Reichs, the quiet solidarity of the subterranean. The year is 1944. The seasons still turn. The frost still patterns the glass. and the sun still sets behind the jagged silhouettes of the city. But the pulse of the nation has slowed to a shallow, ragged breath. As you settle into the stillness of your room, let your mind drift away from the frantic world of the present and into the heavy, dust-laden air of a world that is winding down. We are entering the time of the great fatigue. Tonight, we look at the quiet collapse of the spirit. We are not focusing on the firestorms or the crashing of walls, but on the inner architecture of the human mind when it has been asked to endure too much for too long. We are looking at the small, broken routines, the way a person walks, the way they hold their cup, the way they look at the sky with a weary, hollow indifference. Take a slow, deep breath. Feel the weight of your limbs. We are moving through this history like a shadow through an empty house. The world is cold, the light is dim, and the only sound is the rhythmic, patient beating of your own heart. Imagine the sensation of waking up in a room where the temperature is barely above freezing. It is 1944. You do not wake up with a start. You wake up with a heavy, leaden realization that the day ahead is identical to the day before. The excitement of the early war is a ghost. Even the sharp terror of the mid-war has dulled into a flat, grey exhaustion. You sit on the edge of your bed. The mattress is thin, the springs echoing your every movement. You reach for your clothes, which are laid out in the same order every morning. They are worn thin at the elbows and the knees. The fabric feels cold and slightly damp against your skin. There is a profound silence in the morning now. The trams run less frequently. The horses that once pulled the delivery wagons are gone. The children do not shout as they go to school. They move in quiet, bundled groups, their faces small and pale. You go to the kitchen to perform the ritual of the stove, but the coal bin is nearly empty. You find yourself staring at the few remaining lumps of black stone as if they were jewels. You decide not to light the fire until the evening. You will spend the morning wrapped in a blanket, moving as little as possible to conserve the heat of your own body. This is the economy of the self. You have learned to ration not just your food, but your energy, your breath, and your hope. Routine is the scaffolding of human life. And in 1944, that scaffolding is splintering. The grocery store, once a place of predictable lines, is now a place of perhaps. Perhaps there will be bread. Perhaps there will be a delivery of potatoes. Perhaps the shop will be open at all. You walk to the corner, but the shopkeeper you have known for years is not there. The windows are boarded up with scraps of wood. You don't ask why. You simply turn around and walk back. You have lost the capacity for surprise. When the milk doesn't arrive, when the electricity fails for 6 hours, when the water comes out of the tap as a thin, brown trickle, you simply adapt. The national community has retreated into the individual cell. You no longer look for the grand communal experiences. You focus on the immediate. You spend 2 hours trying to fix a leaking pipe with a piece of old rubber and some string. You spend the afternoon unpicking a sweater to knit a pair of mittens. These small, repetitive tasks are a sanctuary. As long as your hands are moving, your mind cannot wander to the map of the front lines. As long as you are focused on the stitch of the wool, you do not have to think about the fact that your son's letters have stopped coming, or that the sirens will likely wail before the moon is high. The broken routine is a shield against the broken world. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, the mind begins to build its own secret chambers. This is the time of the quiet doubt. It is not a loud, rebellious thought. It is a slow, creeping realization that the foundation of everything you were told is made of sand. You look at the newspaper, the Volkischer Beobachter, which is now printed on thin, greyish paper that feels like it might dissolve in your hands. The headlines still speak of heroic defense and new weapons, but the words no longer have a flavor. They are like sawdust. You look at the portrait of the leader on the wall. The frame is dusty. You realize that you haven't truly looked at it in months. The face that once commanded your attention now feels like an intrusion. You feel a strange, cold detachment. You aren't angry. You are simply finished. You are like a theater-goer who has realized the play is a tragedy. The actors are exhausted, and the exits are blocked. You find yourself remembering small things from 10 years ago. A specific summer afternoon. The taste of a real peach. The sound of a political argument that didn't end in fear. These memories are more real to you than the total war speeches coming through the radio. You are living in a dual reality. Your body is in the 1944 rubble, but your soul has emigrated to a past that no longer exists. Social life has become a matter of the glance, since you cannot speak your heart. You learn to communicate with your eyes. You pass a neighbor in the stairwell. You both know that the final victory is a lie. You both know that the city 10 miles away was leveled last night. You don't say a word. You simply look at each other for a second too long. In that second, 1,000 things are said. You see their exhaustion, their fear, and their shared resignation. This silent communication is a form of resistance, though no one would call it that. It is the refusal to pretend. When you both look at the propaganda poster and then at each other with a blank, weary expression, you are acknowledging the truth. The German greeting has become a mumbled, hurried gesture. The arm doesn't go as high as it used to. The voice is lower. People are retreating into their own coats, their own scarves, their own silence. The city is full of people who are physically close but spiritually miles apart. The only thing that binds you now is the shared weight of the sky and the shared knowledge that the end is coming. Though no one knows what the end will look like. By the late months of 1944, the air raid shelter has become a second home. You spend as much time in the cellar as you do in your apartment. The cellar is a world of its own. It has its own smell, a mixture of damp concrete, old blankets, and the sharp, metallic scent of fear. You have your spot on the wooden bench. You have your shelter neighbors. The conversations in the shelter are circular. You talk about the food. You talk about the miracle weapons that the radio promises. You talk about whose house was hit in the last raid. But mostly, you are silent. You listen to the sounds of the world above the crump of the bombs, the whoosh of the incendiaries. There is a strange, hollow peace in the shelter. When the bombs are falling, you don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to find food. You don't have to mend clothes. Your only job is to exist. You sit in the dim light and you let your mind go blank. You watch the dust shake loose from the ceiling and dance in the air. You are a passenger on a sinking ship, and for the moment, the water hasn't reached your deck. When the all clear sounds, you climb back up to the surface. You look at the sky. If it is red, you know a fire is burning nearby. If it is black, you go back to your cold bed. You do this night after night, until the sirens and the bombs are as much a part of the environment as the wind or the rain. You have become a creature of the dark, an inhabitant of the underground. Even in the middle of this collapse, the mundane persists. This is the most surreal aspect of 1944. A woman will stand in line for an hour to get a stamp on a piece of paper that she knows is likely useless. A man will spend the morning polishing his shoes, even though he is walking through mud and brick dust. Why do we do these things? We do them because the alternative is to disappear. If you stop mending the coat, if you stop polishing the shoes, if you stop standing in the line, you are admitting that the world is gone. The mundane is a way of holding on to the human. You find a single flower growing in a crack in the pavement near a bombed-out shop. You stop and look at it. For a moment, its color is the most important thing in the world. It is a defiance of the gray. You don't pick it. You just look at it, memorizing the shape of the petals. You take that image back to your cold apartment and you keep it in your mind like a hidden treasure. This is how people survive the end times, not through grand acts of bravery, but through the stubborn, quiet refusal to stop being themselves. You continue to wash your face with cold water. You continue to say please and thank you. You continue to dream of a clean shirt and a warm room. These are the small, flickering candles that the darkness cannot quite blow out. The night has settled over the city of 1944. It is a deep, heavy night, illuminated only by the flicker of distant fires. The world is waiting. Imagine the people we have followed. They are asleep in their shelters or their cold apartments. Their hands are tucked into their sleeves for warmth. Their breathing is slow and shallow. They are tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. But as they sleep, the internal architecture of their lives is slowly shifting. The fear is being replaced by a strange, quiet curiosity. What will it be like when the noise stops? What will it be like to breathe air that doesn't smell of smoke? You, too, are moving into that quiet space. The fatigue of the 1940s is falling away from you, leaving only the peaceful stillness of your own room. The history we have explored tonight is a story of endurance, and now it is time for you to rest. The year is 1945. We have reached the final station of our journey through the shadows of the past. As you lie in the gentle embrace of the dark, imagine the world around you becoming exceptionally still. The grand, terrifying machinery of the regime has finally ground to a halt. The gears have seized, the fires are cooling, and the air, for the first time in over a decade, is beginning to clear of the thick, heavy scent of propaganda and smoke. Tonight, we walk through the 0 hour, the stunned null. We are looking at the end of a world, not through the eyes of generals or politicians, but through the eyes of the person standing in the rubble of their own street, wondering what it means to start again. This is a story of silence, of reflection, and of the slow, painful return of the human soul to its own keeping. Imagine a morning in early May. The sun is rising over a city that looks like a skeletal remains of itself. The sky is a pale, innocent blue, contrasting sharply with the jagged edges of the broken brickwork. But the most striking thing is the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The sirens have stopped. The rhythmic thrum of the bombers has vanished. The constant, low-vibrating anxiety that has lived in your chest for years has suddenly found nothing to feed on. You step out of your building, perhaps, one of the few still standing on the block, and you look up. There are no planes. There is only the wind whistling through the empty window frames of the house across the street. For a long time, you just stand there. You feel a strange, hollow lightness. You are alive. That simple fact carries a weight you aren't yet ready to process. You look at your hands. They are dusty, thin, and worn. You realize that for 12 years, you have been holding your breath. Now, in the ruins of the spring of 1945, you finally let it out. It is a long, shaky exhale that seems to carry away the last decade of your life. As you walk down the street, you see a new sight. From almost every window that still has a frame, a piece of white cloth is hanging. A bedsheet, a tablecloth, a torn shirt. They are the white flags of the ordinary people. These sheets are more than just a sign of surrender to the approaching armies. They are a sign of surrender to reality. The final victory has vanished like a fever dream. The grand banners of red and black have been burned in stoves or buried in backyards. In their place is the simple, honest white of the domestic life. You see your neighbor, the woman from 3C, hanging her own sheet over a balcony railing. You look at each other. There is no salute. There is no heil. You simply nod. It is a human nod, a recognition of shared survival. You realize that the national community was a house of cards, and it has blown away, leaving only the human community, a group of tired, hungry people trying to figure out how to find clean water. The ideology that once filled every corner of the air has evaporated. It turns out that you cannot eat a slogan, and you cannot rebuild a wall with a speech. You feel a sense of profound embarrassment for the world you lived in, but it is buried under a much larger, more immediate sense of relief. The theater is empty. The lights are off. The play is over. In the days that follow the 0 hour, the city becomes a landscape of wandering. People are walking, some toward the east, some toward the west. They are looking for family, for homes that might still exist, or simply for a place where the earth isn't scorched. You find yourself walking past the places we visited in our earlier stories. You pass the site of the old watchmaker's shop. It is a pile of dust now, with a single wooden beam sticking out like a broken bone. You pass the school where the children once marched. The playground is overgrown with weeds, and the windows are dark. You realize that the regime didn't just destroy buildings. It destroyed the continuity of time. There is a before and there is an after, and they are separated by a chasm so deep that you cannot see the bottom. You try to remember the person you were in 1933. You remember the excitement, the hope, the order. It feels like you are remembering a stranger. You think about the small compromises you made, the signatures, the silences, the looking away. You realize now that those small things were the bricks that built the prison. There is no one to judge you but yourself, and the judgment is quiet and heavy. It is the realization that the ordinary is fragile, and that it can be twisted into something monstrous if you don't watch over it with a clear heart. As the weeks pass, the ordinary life begins to reassemble itself, but in a new, humbler form. You find a small stove. You find a bag of potatoes. You find a book that hasn't been censored. You sit in the evening light, and you realize that your thoughts are your own again. The radio in the corner is silent, or it plays music that doesn't demand your loyalty. The posters are being torn down, revealing the old stone beneath. You begin to rediscover the pleasure of the individual thought. You can disagree with the person next to you without fear. You can look at the stars and see stars, not a destination for conquest. You are rediscovering the world as it is, not as it was told to you. This is the quietest part of the 0 hour. It is the reawakening of the conscience. It is the moment you realize that you are responsible for your own soul. It is a terrifying realization, but it is also the only thing that makes life worth living. You are no longer a cog. You are a person. And being a person means carrying the weight of the past while walking toward the future. As we reach the end of our narrative, I want you to take a moment to reflect, not with judgment, but with empathy. The people we have followed were not different from us. They loved their children, they feared the dark, they wanted security, and they hoped for a better life. The tragedy of the ordinary life under the regime was how easily those human desires were hijacked. It is a reminder that the world is built of small choices. It is built in the kitchen, in the office, in the schoolyard, and in the silence of the night. History is not just a collection of dates, it is a mirror. When we look into the 1930s and 40s, we see the potential for darkness that exists in any society that chooses certainty over compassion and order over truth. But we also see the incredible resilience of the human spirit, the way people continue to mend socks, plant flowers, and love one another even in the heart of the ruins. The journey is over. The echoes of the marching feet have finally died away. The sirens are a memory. The ruins are being reclaimed by the moss and the ivy. Imagine the city of the past slowly dissolving into a soft, golden light. The jagged edges of the rubble are softening. The shadows are receding. The ghosts of the watchmaker, the mother, the teacher, and the soldier are all finding their rest. They are no longer part of a regime. They are part of the earth. You are back in your own time, in your own bed. The air in your room is sweet and still. You are free to think, free to feel, and free to sleep. The history we have walked through tonight is a heavy one, but it has brought us to this moment of profound quiet. You have survived the journey. You have witnessed the story, and now you can let it go. Imagine a vast, calm ocean under a midnight sky. The water is as smooth as glass. There is no wind, no sound, no movement. This is the ocean of sleep. You are standing on the shore, and the tide is coming in, soft and warm, to carry you away. Your breathing is slow. Your heart is a gentle, steady drum. Your mind is clear and light. You are drifting, drifting. The white sheets are fluttering in the breeze. The gardens are growing. The world is beginning again, and you are safe. Sleep deeply now. Sleep long. The story is finished. Good night.